Hi everyone, my name is Levi, and in this video I want to talk about the upcoming total lunar eclipse in the sign of Aquarius. And this will happen on July 27th, 2018 at 10:20 p.m. Central European Time, that is. The eclipse will be visible over most Europe, Australia, South America, and Asia. And a lunar eclipse occurs when the Earth is exactly between the Sun and the Moon lies in the shadow of the Earth. And the reason why the Moon becomes, or usually becomes, dark red, right, it's a blood moon, is because it is illuminated by the light that passes through the Earth's atmosphere, right? And this is interesting because one of the important players during this eclipse is Mars, right? There's going to be an exact conjunction between the Moon and Mars and Ketu, right? And Mars is, of course, the red planet. And Mars is retrograde, and retrograde planets are closer to the Earth. And if you look at the night sky right now, you know, that red planet, that red glimmering light there, that's Mars, right? It's really powerful. It hasn't been that close to the Earth in about 15 years, right? And so, again, astrology is observational astronomy. So when a planet becomes more prominent, more visible, it becomes stronger, right? And it is part of this eclipse. And of course, Mars is the surgeon, right? The surgeon that wants to cut some cords of the past, right? Mars is a cruel planet, right? It's it's considered the cruelest planet, in fact, right, in Vedic astrology. And so it wants to help facilitate the birth of something new by cutting away something that is unhealthy, okay? And of course, Ketu represents endings and completions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, okay? So we had a lot of red energy going on, right? A lot of passionate energy to cut through the matrix, we could say, okay? And cutting some cords of the past, of things that do not longer serve us, right? Individually and on a collective level, okay? Okay, so when we talk about the nodes, right? Rahu and Ketu, the north and the south node of the moon, right? So the moon revolves around the Earth, right? And whenever the path of the moon intersects with the ecliptic, and the ecliptic is the apparent path of the sun traveling around the Earth, right? This is where the nodes are being formed. Whenever the moon enters the northern ecliptic hemisphere, this is where Rahu is being formed, right? And whenever the moon enters the southern ecliptic hemisphere, right, this is where Ketu is being formed, or the south node. Another name for the north and south node are the ascending and descending node. Okay, so ascension or ascending represents something that is born, right? The birth of something new, and descending node is the ending of something. And so Rahu and Ketu, as I mentioned, are created by the dance, the interaction between the sun and the moon. And of course, the sun represents the light of consciousness, the soul, our intuitive connection to the whole, right? Our identity, right? It's the foundational point, one of the foundational points in the horoscope. The moon, the counterpart, right? The fully feminine planet represents the mind, or the manas. And in the mind lives the idea of separate existence, which is the ego. Otherwise, we cannot become individual human beings. And also the jiva, which is the conscious life force, which, you know. And so through the agency of the moon, we experience ourselves subjectively. So the sun and the moon are the two foundational points in the horoscope. They are the two planets of self, okay? And so they create the nodes. So Rahu, the ascending node, represents the birth of individual consciousness. And Ketu, the descending node, represents the ending of individual consciousness and the merging with something, with the universal consciousness. That's why Ketu is associated with liberation, right? Endings and completions of something that you have identified with on a personal level, okay? So between Rahu and Ketu, all the other planets come into existence, we could say, right? The sun is the king, the moon is the queen, and all the other planets are servants to the king and the queen. Right? So that's why the sun only rules one sign, and the moon as well, right? They both rule one sign. Sun rules Leo, the king. Moon rules Cancer, the queen. Right? All the other planets are servants. Okay, so Rahu and Ketu represents the path of our consciousness, right? The path that our consciousness is evolving and growing towards. And so Rahu and Ketu's placements, the nodal placement, is going to be very important in terms of your soul's maturation process, right? In this lifetime, okay? Rahu and Ketu also are the forces that create changes within our DNA, okay? So some people are uncomfortable with including like reincarnation into their paradigm. But you can also say a lot about it when you look at it in terms of changes within DNA. The nodes are very strongly connected to our ancestral lineage, especially Ketu represents the past, right? Our past ancestral lineage. And so in that sense, it rules, or it shows where we are holding on to, right? What patterns that are deeply ingrained within us, okay, that also give us a certain amount of comfort, of course, because whatever Ketu influences, or what Ketu's placement in your horoscope and the planet it's joins, right, are going to be things and areas in your life that you're very capable, you know, of dealing with, of applying, expressing, okay. But at the same time, Rahu, you know, creates this compulsive need within us, because Rahu's placement is where our soul is underdeveloped. It's where our consciousness needs to travel to, needs to go through to balance out imbalances within our consciousness. Okay, so Ketu is where you fall back on. It represents your security paradigm. So in that sense, ancestral lineage, right? If your parents have treated you in a certain way, then you're gonna be accustomed to that kind of behavior. There's gonna be all sorts of patterns emerging from that within you. Okay, and so it's gonna feel comfortable, even though it doesn't necessarily is something constructive. See, so Ketu is very much where we suppress a life energy. Okay. So there's an intimate connection between Ketu, the sun, and Saturn, okay? Of course, Saturn and sun are genetically related. Saturn is the child of the sun. Saturn represents our mortality, okay? The sun represents the soul, that creative spark, eternal spark, we could say, okay? And Saturn is what makes us human, right? Saturn represents our body identification. In the moon lives the ego, right? Which is necessary to become individuals, because I have to see myself as a separate being, right? Otherwise, I don't have any distinction to make. So I would not recognize myself even, right? Saturn represents the pains of our ego, the pains of our separation from the sun, from the whole. So Ketu is very strongly connected to the truth, right? The avatar that is created, that is connected to Ketu, was the one that delivered the Vedas to the Lord of creation, in order for him to transmit that information, right, into the next cycle of creation. And so Ketu is very much about the truth, about the divine truth, not about your personal truth. And that's why it's a cruel planet, because whatever you identify too strongly with, right, Ketu eventually will take that thing away, right? Ketu is this inhibiting planet, a narrowing planet that will create deep dissatisfaction with the things that it's influencing. Initially, it will create a comfort, your comfort zone, right? Because one of the names for Ketu is flag, okay, where you are accomplished. Also, castle, okay. But also one of the other names is smoky, right? I wrote it here a little bit. Smoky, so it's veiling things, it's covering up things. It wants to end these things. That's like, it shows a dissatisfaction, also disillusion, and this kind of thing. Very much always associated with Ketu, because we need to go into whatever Rahu indicates in the horoscope. Because again, this is where our soul is underdeveloped. So Rahu is a trickster. It's considered a trickster. Why? Because it's going to create this compulsive need within us, okay? And then the ego is going to invest in that thing, heavily invest in that thing. It wants to get that thing. And one of the things that Rahu does is it grants wishes. So it's going to give you that thing, but whenever you get that thing, right, it's not always going to give you, but it can give you a lot. Whenever you have that thing, the ego is going to be disillusioned, okay? Because that's the whole trickster nature of Rahu. And Rahu wants to push us out of our comfort zone in order for our consciousness to evolve, right? So we think we want this, right? And then we go after that. And then once we get it, it doesn't fulfill us. That's why Rahu and the nodes are cruel planets, okay? So they just want to help us in evolving our consciousness. That's their goal. They're not, and so finding ultimate fulfillment within material affairs, for example, right? Material things is an illusion, okay? And this is what the nodes point towards, right? This is what they do. They're cruel, but they help us, or they help facilitate a deep maturation process, okay? Of detaching from things that simply cannot fulfill us deeply, okay? So it's a spiritual journey, you could say. And so the nodes are very important, obviously, during lunar eclipses, solar eclipses, when the nodes get active, right? This is an important spiritual time in that sense. So it can be a difficult time for the personality, for the ego, because it needs to let go. And that's why, there's always this fear associated with the nodes, especially Rahu, right? But at the same time, it is the way to go. And because underneath there is something very beautiful and very profound emerging ever more through these eclipse points, right? So that's very important, okay? And this is the goal of this, what is happening. So it can be difficult. I don't know what's going on in your personal horoscope or in your life, but sometimes the going gets rough, right? And sometimes it's really beautiful. But underneath there is something going on which is carrying the whole thing. And, our souls are in control, right? Even how terrible the world may seem. And so we need to constructively use this energy, okay? Now, to go back to astrology here. So interesting to note is also that at the time of the lunar eclipse, in India, they have this celebration which is called Guru Purnima, right? Guru means teacher or heavy. Actually, Guru means heavy, right? That's why Jupiter is called Guru, and because it's the largest planet besides the sun, right, in our solar system. And so Guru is, of course, the teacher who is more heavy in knowledge and wisdom, right? And so during that time, they're going to celebrate their teachers, avatars, gurus, sages, right? Even I think in the academic world, the students honor their teachers, etc. So it's a very powerful moment in time, right? We also see that Jupiter is still trining Neptune here. Of course, Neptune is one of the outer planets which is connected to our divine consciousness, right? So that's a nice aspect. There's also a sextile between Jupiter and Venus, right? It's a loose sextile, and also between Jupiter and Pluto. Now, I also have to mention that eclipses are always a part of a larger family, you could say. So, which is called Saros, or eclipse series, right? And this particular eclipse season is very strongly relational, you could say. It has a strong relationship energy. We also see that Venus, which is the planet of relationships, of course, is trining Pluto at the time of the lunar eclipse, and it's also opposing Neptune. So that's one way of looking at it. Of course, eclipses, right, is when the sun and the moon are opposite in the zodiac, and of course the nodes are always opposite, right? They're always 180 degrees apart. And so an aspect of an opposition is always fundamentally relational, right? Because the thing that is 180 degrees away is the furthest away, and it also has the strongest attraction. So oppositions are always relational, right? If you look at the first house is the birth of the body, the seventh house is the spouse, right? It's is the other body. So there's a strong, that has this relationship energy. I mean, the core of it is relational. If we look at opposite signs, for example, then in their extremes, they're always going to act similar. Okay, so they're like both ends of the same stick. And so we have a full moon, right, in opposition, and nodes are opposing. So it has this, well, we can say that it has this relationship connotation or energy. But during this eclipse, Venus is always also strongly related or strongly active, part of the equation here, okay? Of course, Uranus is squaring the nodes, I have to mention. So Uranus is strongly related to the sun because it is the 10th planet. The sun is the first planet, right? So numerologically, they are related. The Uranus is the 10th planet, right? So they both carry the number 1. And so Uranus wants to create breakthroughs on a level of individuality, okay? It wants to bring in the light of the soul, say, because it has this sun connotation. And of course, Uranus, when we look at Western astrology, is the father of Saturn, right? And Saturn is, of course, represents our complexes, our psychological complexes. And this is going to be important because, of course, Saturn rules the sign of Aquarius, and the lunar eclipse is happening in the sign of Aquarius. So this is very much about becoming psychologically mature, okay? Saturn, I mentioned that the moon represents our ego, right? A healthy ego is a healthy moon, or a healthy moon is a healthy ego. Saturn represents the pains of our ego. As I mentioned, that pains of that separation from the soul, okay? It represents our mortality. And so Uranus wants to free us from our psychological complexes, right? Because they're, again, genetically related. The sun is the father of Saturn, right? And Uranus, when we look at Western astrology, is the father of Saturn, right? So there's a nice overlap there. And Uranus wants to create breakthroughs in terms of our psychology, and especially this configuration, this square between Uranus and the south node there and the north node is going to help us with that. It's an aspect of tension. So whenever the ego, because the ego is never prepared, right? The only thing that the ego wants to do is survive. That's its only goal, and it doesn't see any further than its own fragmented self, okay? It's not able. So in Aquarius, breaking free from psychological complexes means that we're learning to integrate the shadow, right? Which is a concept that was introduced by Carl Jung, right? And so the shadow, that part of, what is it? Our consciousness, and that unconscious, or I should say that unconscious part of our personality that the ego doesn't identify in itself, right? So it's about integrating the shadow. So and Ketu is going to help us in releasing whatever is no longer serving us on the path, right? And this is very much on a level of psychology, which is, indicated by the lunar eclipse happening in the sign of Aquarius, because Aquarius is the water bearer, right? So Aquarius is symbolized by a man holding a jar, right? And he's standing in a pool of water, right? By the way, that's the reason why Aquarius is connected to islands, and we know what has been going on in the recent past and still going on in Hawaii, for example, right? So there's a lot of stirring up. So the lunar eclipse is also happening in fixed signs, right? So fixed signs do not like to change. Like radical change is not really part of their paradigm, we could say. So there's a lot of resistance in respect to what is going on. So it can be a painful thing because in fixed signs the ego can become quite fixed, right? So, but Uranus, of course, squaring this point, this nodal axis will definitely help us in actually breaking through, right? And of course, the south node is also indicating that, like, okay, so I also have to mention, because see, the outer planets are usually not used by Vedic astrologers, because they say that the nodes are doing it for them. Like the nodes are giving them the information they need to do the readings and everything. But I think it's very important to include the outer planets as well. Right? They were discovered. They play a very important role. Also, if you look at what they're actually doing in a horoscope, I mean, it's really amazing. And so the outer planets, which are, you know, invisible, right, to the naked eye, right? So they represent the transformational forces, the forces that work on the subconscious level, and so on, right? They are going to help to get insight into what the nodes represent. So the nodes act like gateways for what the outer planets are wanting to bring in. Okay, the outer planets are a trinity. They work together, right? I mentioned that the nodes act as a gateway, and they are being assisted by the outer planets to create the breakthroughs within our consciousness, right? As I mentioned, the south and the north node are created by the dance between the sun and the moon, who are the two personal planets. Okay, so the outer planets are not visible to the naked eye. That's why they're not considered personal planets. Okay, and they're not considered to create things on a concrete material level in your life, but rather they are the transformational forces that work behind the scenes. So they work more on a subconscious level, and they help the nodes, right, to create the changes within consciousness. Okay, and this is going to be shown by Rahu and Ketu's placement in the natal horoscope, but also in transits, and we're having this eclipse going on, right? So see, Uranus relates to the sun, right, as I mentioned, because they're numerologically related. The sun is the first planet, Uranus the 10th planet. Uranus wants to create breakthroughs on a level of identity. Okay, Uranus relates to Brahma, which is the creator in Hindu mythology, right? The second planet is the moon, which is the reflection of the light of the sun, right? Second planet is the moon, which represents the mind. And the 11th planet is Neptune. So Neptune wants to create breakthroughs on a level of mind. Okay, they're also numerologically related. And Neptune relates to Vishnu, and Vishnu is the preserver of things, dissolves and preserves things. Neptune has a quality or Vishnu has a quality of sustenance, okay, so preserving things. And then the third planet is Mars, right, which numerologically relates to Pluto, which is the 12th planet, right? And Pluto wants to create breakthroughs on a level of energy, so the way we exert our energy. Okay, and Mars is, of course, rules our energetic system, right, our instincts, etc. So Pluto and Mars all have these connotations, right? But Pluto is that transformational force that creates breakthroughs on a level of energy, so on an energetic level. That's why these Pluto transits, difficult transits, can be very, well, you know, Pluto transits in general are very intense, right? And can be very challenging because it demands to let go of ego attachment in respect to how we direct our energy. See, so so these three planets are intimately connected, and they try to they help us in really in transforming our consciousness. Okay, we see that Uranus squares the nodes. Okay, so Uranus wants to create breakthroughs. It wants to free us from old, worn-out patterns in respect to what the moon represents and Mars, right? The moon is, of course, the mind, so it's going to happen on a level of mind in the sign of Aquarius. And as I mentioned, so Aquarius is, you know, symbolized by a man holding a jar, right? Who is standing in a pool of water. And so, see, Aquarius is, we know that Aquarius is the humanitarian, right? Because, and it holds water, meaning that it represents everything what has intrinsic value, which is water, right? Without water, nothing can survive. And so that's why it's the humanitarian, because it sees the intrinsic value in everyone. That's the power, the strength of Aquarius. And so Pisces, for example, represents, is the sign where we unite with something divine. Okay, it's the 12th sign, original 12th sign of the zodiac, which is liberation. It just has a strong K2 connotation, of course, right? But in Aquarius, we become humanitarians. We become psychologically stable because it's ruled by Saturn, right? Saturn rules our complexes. So we become psychologically mature. And it's only when we become psychologically healthy and mature that we can express our uniqueness, our unique individuality, right? That's why Uranus is also related to, in Western astrology, to Aquarius, right? Because it's that individual spark, that individuality, okay? But it's through breaking through the complexes, which is Saturn, which is the ruler, traditional ruler of Aquarius, that we naturally unfold to express our individuality and to become true humanitarians, right? Who see the intrinsic value of all beings. Right? And that is the step that is like a prerequisite, right, for liberation. The divine friendship is also, right? Friendship and Aquarius is strongly connected as well, right? Okay, so because we could become a friend to ourselves in the first place, right? To our own complexes and psychology, we accept the pluses and the minuses, and we become more and more authentic in who we are, right? Okay, so breakthroughs on a level of minds in terms of psychology. That's why the old texts relate relate Aquarius to alcoholism and addictions. Okay, so both signs, Gemini in respect to Capricorn talks about it's the most fated sign. Okay, so Capricorn can be very resistant to change, but it can also create immense breakthroughs because it needs to really work through the ego there, right? Which is always indicated by Saturn, right? Saturn is going through the pains of the ego. And so these two signs are strong signs. They're, Capricorn rules the upper part of the legs, which is has the femur, right, which is the largest bone in the body, and Aquarius rules the shanks, which has the tibia, which is the second largest or strongest bone in the body, right? So these signs, both ruled by Saturn, definitely can, endure things and can work through things. And when they do, they create great breakthroughs, right? So, and they're the two signs that lay before liberation, right? Before the sign of Pisces, okay? So working the ego, going beyond the pains of the ego, accepting life as a human being, right? With our limitations, with our strengths and our weaknesses. And so, okay, so that is, what is going on. And as I mentioned, like because the old texts, talk about Aquarius as they are related to alcoholism, is that when we're not psychologically balanced, we, indulge in all sorts of compensatory behavior, of course, right? And so it's all connected there. So there is a deep detachment process going on. This lunar eclipse helps to detach from that, right? From patterns that are not healthy. Okay, it can be addictions, it can be any type of addiction, it can be holding on to something that doesn't serve you any longer. And so if the ego is not ready, it will be very painful. But if it's it is open for change and for whatever pain that needs to come through, right? Because it can be painful. But the point is that Uranus is wanting to liberate us from that pain, from some. It's like a tumor, right? And so, okay, I think that's enough said about that, right? So, We have a nice trine between Jupiter and Neptune, which acts as a buffer, right? So, meaning a buffer in the sense that it's a very spiritual combination, okay? Jupiter and trine with Neptune. So, finding deeper meaning with whatever is happening for you, to you, okay? Venus is also opposing Neptune, so Jupiter and Venus are the two Brahman planets who want to understand things. Venus is the planet of worldly wisdom. Jupiter is the planet of higher wisdom. Okay, so, but they're two Brahmins. Venus is also the planet of healing, of course. Any, sign or house it conjuncts in your natal horoscope is a sign where you will find healing. Okay, so detaching, because it's in an opposition with Neptune, detaching from relationships that are where the ego is heavily invested, for example. Okay, so Neptune also has that dissolving quality, but there's also a trine between Venus and Pluto here. And so the trine is a harmonious aspect, so it brings things in a natural way, right? To some conclusions, or again, Pluto represents ego death, so there could be some, Pluto transits are always intense, right? Even the trines can be quite intense, but there's something that would quite nicely and harmoniously resolve right in respect to your self-value, also because Venus represents your value, and then it's debilitated in Virgo, right? So people with Venus in Virgo, initially, especially in the first stage of life, can find it difficult to make healthy choices, for example, because Venus is the planet of making healthy choices. Okay, so there's some detachment going on as well in respect to Venus, and I mentioned Venus is an important player here, right? This whole eclipse season is very much about relationships, and of course, everything is about relationship, the relationship with ourselves, right? That's why we have all these oppositions in the horoscope, right? And there's also a sextile between Jupiter and Pluto. So there's a lot of support with whatever is going on, with whatever process is going on for you. And there's a good opportunity during this eclipse to create some real breakthroughs through tension, and to move forward, like to move back into Leo. Now the nodes are going to shift signs pretty soon. I think it's going to be the end of November. Rahu will enter the sign of Cancer, and Ketu will enter the sign of Capricorn. So there's going to be a new cycle. Right, last eclipses, a couple of years have been all dedicated to the Aquarius Leo axis. Okay, Aquarius is survival. It's ruled by Saturn. Leo is your inspiration, following yourself, finding your inspirations, and to connect with that, with your dharma, okay, with what you need to express to feel fulfilled. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. I just wanted to add this phrase here from Brihat Parasha Shastra, because we're going to have the Guru Purnima, right? So, which is all about honoring the teachers, and this is destroying the strengths of the Daityas, increasing strength of the Devas, aiming to establish Dharma. The auspicious birds proceed regularly from the Grahas. Okay, refers to teachers, avatars, and people who come in with a wisdom and trying to assist us and the world in evolving our consciousness and to become healthy and fulfilled human beings, right? Okay, all the best to you, and talk to you later. Okay, I also wanted to mention, before I forget, is that Saturn, Capricorn is under great manifesting influence, right? I mentioned this. So it means, the three manifesting influences are onto Capricorn, right? So I made a video for this channel a couple of months ago under Saturn's transit through Capricorn, where I extensively talked about the manifesting influence on Capricorn for the whole year of 2018. I also made a new moon video for Capricorn, right, which was in the beginning of the year, where I explained about the manifesting influence to Capricorn. So you can check that video out. Because now this is playing, right? Mercury is still manifesting Capricorn as well. So there's three manifesting influence, which is good. So Capricorn in the last few weeks, or perhaps it's still going, is manifesting on a concrete and a material level. This is a Gemini technique, right? So which Gemini deals with the concrete and the material, what you have there. And so Capricorn should be manifesting. So you can look at these explanations, check out these videos, and you will find some things coming to fruition there for sure, okay? Even if they haven't already, okay? All the best to you, and talk to you later. Bye. Hi everyone, my name is Levi, and in this video, I want to talk about the upcoming total lunar eclipse in the sign of Aquarius. And this will happen on July 27th, 2018 at 10:20 p.m. Central European Time, that is. The eclipse will be visible over most Europe, Australia, South America, and Asia. And a lunar eclipse occurs when the Earth is exactly between the Sun and the Moon lies in the shadow of the Earth. And the reason why the Moon becomes, or usually becomes, dark red, right, it's a blood moon, is because it is illuminated by the light that passes through the Earth's atmosphere, right? And this is interesting because one of the important players during this eclipse is Mars, right? There's going to be an exact conjunction between the Moon and Mars and Ketu, right? And Mars is, of course, the red planet. And Mars is retrograde, and retrograde planets are closer to the Earth. And if you look at the night sky right now, you know, that red planet, that red glimmering light there, that's Mars, right? It's really powerful. It hasn't been that close to the Earth in about 15 years, right? And so, again, astrology is observational astronomy. So when a planet becomes more prominent, more visible, it becomes stronger, right? And it is part of this eclipse. And of course, Mars is the surgeon, right? The surgeon that wants to cut some cords of the past, right? Mars is a cruel planet, right? It's considered the cruelest planet, in fact, right, in Vedic astrology. And so it wants to help facilitate the birth of something new by cutting away something that is unhealthy, okay? And of course, Ketu represents endings and completions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, okay? So we had a lot of red energy going on, right? A lot of passionate energy to cut through the matrix, we could say, okay? And cutting some cords of the past, of things that do not longer serve us, right? Individually and on a collective level, okay? Okay, so when we talk about the nodes, right? Rahu and Ketu, the north and the south node of the moon, right? So the moon revolves around the Earth, right? And whenever the path of the moon intersects with the ecliptic, and the ecliptic is the apparent path of the sun traveling around the Earth, right? This is where the nodes are being formed. Whenever the moon enters the northern ecliptic hemisphere, this is where Rahu is being formed, right? And whenever the moon enters the southern ecliptic hemisphere, right, this is where Ketu is being formed, or the south node. Another name for the north and south node are the ascending and descending node. Okay, so ascension or ascending represents something that is born, right? The birth of something new, and descending node is the ending of something. And so Rahu and Ketu, as I mentioned, are created by the dance, the interaction between the sun and the moon. And of course, the sun represents the light of consciousness,